Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome to our webinar. So today we have with us Asmaa Abu Mezied. We are going to talk about Palestinian mutual aid as survival, solidarity, and collective power. So Asma here is a feminist economist, researcher, and development practitioner from Gaza. She holds an MPA from Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs and a Master in Management and Human Resources from the London School of Economics and Political Science and coordinates PalSumood. So maybe you can talk more about what is PalSumood.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. PalSumood is an initiative that emerged when the genocide started. And the purpose of the initiative is really to coordinate the different effort of Palestinian-led mutual aid groups that existed in Gaza in a way that allow those mutual aid to work much more collaboratively, efficiently, and effectively. But then also view their work from a political lens. So to not to think about aid as depoliticized humanitarian cause, but rather to view aid and like support for our community, Palestinian community in Gaza, from a very political lens.
You call it initiative or organization? What do you call it?
It's an initiative. It's an informal initiative, so it's not registered. And that was like a very intentional decision because we don't want to replicate the formalization of institution and just become another institution that exists in the Palestinian aid ecosystem. We believe that the role of PalSumood is to provide the infrastructure that is needed for the mutual aid who are at the forefront of servicing the community, of providing like different needs for the community. And our role is to be how do we facilitate their access to resources, their access to, for example, funds, their access to digital infrastructure, their access to the different needs and things that they need, while also thinking about like how do we work collectively, because our survival is in how do we move as a collective rather than compete against each other. And the competition is something that is resulting from years and years of colonization of our minds, particularly in the NGO space. And we don't want to do that. We want to decolonize even how we think in order to move forward in a true sense of Palestinian spirit, rather than what has been imposed on us on how should servicing the community looks.
So basically, this is not another organization or NGO.
No.
It is basically about asking people to complement each other, like the existing NGO or work that has already been there in Gaza, specifically Gaza, right?
Yeah.
So like how they can complement each other, right?
Yeah. So like for the mutual aid, it really emerged from it has roots in the Palestinian history. In the Palestinian history, there is the concept of awn. And awn, it's like when a person wants to harvest the land or they want to build a land, they call other family members, they call other community members to come and help me to build this land, to harvest this land. And then it's a very reciprocal kind of process. Where like I help you, you help me. But there is another aspect of the Palestinian history called faza. Faza is when an emergency situation happens, and then you need everyone to come and help you out. So if a house collapses, you want everyone to come and help you, like remove the stones and the walls in order to like extract people out. So these two things merge together during the genocide, where there is a need for like the provision of support, the provision of resources to the people at a situation of a genocide. So it's a very emergent and emergency kind of situation. And when you think about this mutual aid, it is combining those both. And most of the mutual aid that existed in Gaza, that is Palestinian-led, it actually started from community members getting together and saying, well, nobody is delivering any kind of assistance, any water or food to this area, so either we do it ourselves or nobody will provide these services. And therefore, like you will find like community kitchen, which we call it tekiya, being established, particularly at the beginning of genocide, in different spaces in Gaza. And a lot of our members have started with a tekiya or a community kitchen with water distribution, and then they evolved their operation based on what the needs on the ground was forcing them. So when people like were forced to from the north of Gaza to the south of Gaza, there is transportation costs, there is a need for tents. So the work is evolving based on what's the needs of the community, and none of the mutual aid is registered organization. And a lot of them, they don't want to be registered because they don't want to be part of like the aid industry that is happening in Palestine. And almost most of the mutual aid, they view this work as voluntary work. So the teams that exist in the diaspora, they don't want to get money or any kind of administrative costs because they view that this is our responsibility toward our community. Now, those who are part of the mutual aid on the ground, they receive different types of compensation because those are people putting their life at stake, their time at stake as well, in order to deliver services to people. So they get, they become eligible to take some of the food package and so on. So they also have a family and who also need food, water, and access to that.
So basically, like this is something that already been there in the Palestinian culture, Palestinian community, right?
Yes.
Like it's a community effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in almost every culture, even in Malaysia, we used to be doing things based on supporting community, but we are pretty distant from that now. It's about you doing for yourself.
Yeah.
So maybe you can share about how they make decision, how they remain accountable, especially because when there's no one watching or monitoring or doing auditing, I would say, according to the modern way of managing things. So how do we ensure this will be, be taken care of?
So I think accountability is a very big question, and it's a very big issue, and a very important one because, as you've mentioned, with genocide and also like with conflict and war all around the world, there is profiteers, people who will like abuse people compassion and solidarity in order to profit, make money out of it. So the question is like, how do you remain accountable, and how do you execute accountability in the context of Gaza? And among our like the PalSumood, what PalSumood is doing right now is like really thinking and developing accountability framework, but from a Palestinian lens. So it's not an accountability framework that is adopted in INGOs around the world, but like what does it mean to be accountable? And the first layer that we are discussing within our group and with our members is that the accountability has to think about the community and has to be accountability to people. Like if you view the resources that you collect, the funds that you collect as resources and funds that is owned by a Palestinian society, then it's not a charity. Then it becomes a political project. Mm-hmm. And then if it's not a charity, then you will not be obsessing about like donor requirement, those who are donating and what they need and like what they think should be happening in Gaza, and your priority will be toward what the Palestinian community is needing. And how do I communicate with the Palestinian community about the funds I received? If you think about the work of INGOs, usually you receive the fund, you do all your financial due diligence, you make your reports about your impact, and you send it to the donor. But you don't speak to the community about like, okay, we received this amount of money, this is what we've done, and this is like what we are trying to do next. Now, is the mutual aid functioning right now at the stage of like being accountable for the Palestinian community? Not yet, because again, like there's decades and decades of colonization of our minds and how we operate, that we are not there yet. But that's where PalSumood is trying to influence. Like, how do we think about accountability frameworks that try and like be accountable to Palestinian people, but at the same time inform the people who donate about what's happening on the ground, and use that as an opportunity for political education. So these are like two things that is important for us to view them together and think about like what does it mean? How do we think about this issue in a way that serves the Palestinian people and consider it truly a political project rather than just like a depoliticized humanitarian exercise.
So, like, considering it as a political project is still a healthy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very important because when you center the people you serve, the Palestinian community that you are serving, at the heart of everything, of your decision making, of how you set your priorities, of how you communicate with the people regarding what you're doing, you are building a trust. And this trust is extremely fundamental for like continuity of your relationship with the community, for setting examples of what a healthy society looks like, and much more important for like reconstruction, because a community that understands accountability, that sees examples of like a liberatory accountability practices, will later on be able to like reject any other form of accountability that is like colonial form of accountability that is imposed on them.
We understand some part of the accountability, which is important, and also understanding it's more about addressing the needs of people on the ground rather than what you want to give. So because it will not be connected, right? So maybe also share with us on the challenges that is affecting the mutual aid group, and like how to go about this.
So there are multi-layered challenges that is facing mutual aid groups. Some of these challenges are faced by NGOs and INGOs, but some of them are like very specific to mutual aid because of their informal nature. Of course, funding is one of the biggest challenges that face the mutual aid, and it's related to like the stream of consistent and stable funding, because the availability of stable funding will enable this mutual aid to plan, which is fundamental when everything around you keep changing. So to have like a stable funding enables the mutual aid to provide and also be honest with the community that we will be providing this amount of like food trucks, for example, or like water trucks, or like this service, then they honor their promises to the community. Now, the challenge even with the funds is another layer of it, is that unfortunately we are in a world where like misery sells, and the more like the more horrific the pictures and the situation in Gaza, the more the funds spike. But then when the genocide turn into like a pattern of slow death, then people think, oh, things are stable, everything is okay, and therefore like Gaza does not need like, which is not true. And that's what Israel is trying to portray in its social media and its in news channels, is that the situation in Gaza is stable. But if you look at like the pattern of killing, it's almost the same of the very active. And that showed us that solidarity that is based on, how horrific things are, is unfortunately problematic solidarity, because we need to also think about what's happening, be also educated when we are like supporting a certain cause. But the second layer to it is that the creation of a culture that dehumanizes Palestinian bodies. So, like unintentionally, one becomes a part of the Israeli scheme of dehumanizing Palestinian bodies by like constantly demanding this proof of like, a sad, miserable Palestinian in need of food and water. And like you are taking away the Palestinian dignity, you're taking away the Palestinian agency. So I think that requires us to even revise, like, how do we support, even financial support? And there are different examples of people, like, for example, putting a certain amount of money every month, and that is like something stable and consistent. So like it's not affected. Your donation is not based on like the pictures you see, the misery that you see. It's because of a true commitment to a struggle, and you want to help like alleviating that struggle. So that's one aspect in terms of the challenges. Now, of course, there are other layer of challenge, which is related to the movement of money. What we are seeing right now is that the global financial system is putting much more restriction on the movement of money. So even if you are able to raise funds, the way you move funds from like different parts of the world into Gaza is extremely challenging. And like there is an introduction of regulations every single day that makes any money movement to Gaza extremely difficult, if not impossible. And that means that the mutual aid have to be in a constant problem-solving mindset in order to ensure that they are able to support household and community in Gaza. Now, the third aspect that comes to the challenges is the emotional cost of working in a mutual aid. Some of the mutual aid who are members of our network has lost team members on the ground being targeted by Israel. So how do you go back to work when you lose members, when they are being killed in a most brutal way? But also because you are in a direct contact with people's needs and the stories that you hear, it affects your ability to like sustain yourself and continue. And as I said, like most of this work is volunteer work. So you really need to have like a capacity to like do the work that is extremely important, but also handle the emotional toll that comes with it. And also like be supportive to others who are also going through a much more difficult situation that you are. So that's another layer of challenges that not really spoken about. And risk, of course, when you are performing. Another layer of challenges is related to like how do you operate in a context where everything is in a constant move. And some of those people who have never done humanitarian work before, they were part, they had the drive to like go and support the community, and they found themselves working in like mutual aid, but no experience. So how do you like have the expertise and build the expertise from scratch was also challenging for a lot of them.
Like when it comes to the part where because I think everyone, even organizations in Malaysia, those who have office in Gaza, they will still be using the method of using like sad, a devastating picture to sell the campaign. Maybe you have like a suggestion on how to go around that.
Yeah, I think this requires like a really comprehensive approach, and it requires the willingness to go through a difficult conversation, which is not easy, and particularly at the time we're in, because to go through that route of challenging the mainstream stereotype, that means that you will lose some funds. And that means that probably it will take time and will take time for people to understand what you're trying to say. But the question that I will push back or like I'll raise to people who donate is truly like the question: why are you supporting like the Palestinian, the steadfastness of Palestinian and Gaza? Are you believing in the cause? And like, how do you think of your contribution from like a moral perspective, not only a moral perspective? Do you want to see your family member on a picture, and is that like what you think should motivate others or not? Now, of course, some of the mutual aid are not immune to that pressure of like constant, like, showing constant misery in order to like obtain funds, particularly with the decline of the funds since the ceasefire. But others are trying to like shift the narrative a little bit and be much more informative in how they communicate. So using their social media in order to communicate about the shift and the fluctuation in the prices. Other are sharing moments of joy, or like moments of like children getting education, which is like every parents in this world want to see.
Relate to, yeah.
Yeah, so like these are like some other aspects, but it's not easy, to be honest, and difficult, and it requires every stakeholders who are working, whether in the mutual aid, in the INGO spaces, but also policymakers and those who communicate with people to donate, to really educate in that term.
So yeah, so like educate, right? It
Yeah.
will take time, but also make effort to educate. So maybe we can talk about now about the funders and international organization and solidarity actors, how they can take their role to support this.
So to be honest, like the mutual aid is creating for us an alternative of what would a Palestinian-led support to community looks like. It's not easy. It's not perfect. It has its own issues. But there are ways through which, like the existing system of like the aid industry in Palestine, could support the mutual aid, whether inside Palestine but also globally. One of them is that these organizations have, because of their ability to access restricted and unrestricted funding, and because of the size of their operation, they have a lot of infrastructure in place that could be shared with mutual aid, so that the money that the mutual aid can obtain could be directed to something that serves people directly. So, for example, instead of a mutual aid, just a very simplistic example, instead of a mutual aid using or renting a warehouse, they could share a space of a warehouse of another organization, and then that cost that could have been going to renting a warehouse could go directly to the people. Particularly that the majority of those mutual aid are working in places where those NGOs are not functioning. So near to the yellow line, in places where Israeli constantly target. So like they are already serving the community because of their belief in the community and the need for support, in places where like some of these organizations not functioning. So how do we think about the complementarity is a very fundamental aspect. That's one thing. Another thing is that the strength of the mutual aid and the funds through donation is that it's unconditional funding. And the unconditional funding, it means it can go toward what the community actually want, not as a part of a program that is designed by like certain experts or like by different priorities, let's say.
So like it will be connected instead of disconnected.
Exactly. So now there are some, for example, funding institutes that provide unrestricted funding or unconditional funding directly for informal groups on the ground, not only in Palestine but globally. And these funds are usually limited, so it could be like $5,000, like $10,000. But these are like one way of how people in the funding space could be held accountable toward the work that is being done on the ground. So my call or demand is like actually we need to see much more examples of like unrestricted fund that goes to informal group that does not provide like a comprehensive, meticulous due diligence process, because the mutual aid do not have the time to write like a very like elegant concept notes. No, they are very busy working on the ground, and to a lot of them, if the fund is gonna like take away some of my time and energy from what's happening on the ground, I don't want that fund. So that's like another layer of doing that, and really like connecting with these mutual aid. Like we have 7 mutual aid groups in our network, in addition to other ecosystem actors who are doing phenomenal work on the ground. So we are happy to facilitate spaces where like funders could get to know to this mutual aid and what they are doing, and look at like how their political message is there and like support them directly.
So it's about practicality too, right?
Yeah.
Especially people on the ground.
Yeah.
Like reporting, like they're not going to see
Yes.
on like proper data to
Yeah.
report. Yeah. So I think lastly maybe you can address on what needs to change for Palestinian mutual aid groups in order to receive meaningful support. but also preserve their independence. We're talking about these like the practicality part, the political purpose, and the community-led character.
I think there are like different stakeholders, and different stakeholders have different responsibilities. So, for example, like advocacy and influencing the groups and acting in that space could play a major role in advocating for how do you support mutual aid in a way that provide unconditional funding that does not influence the political message. But also there are spaces where money movement is a problem. It's a very serious problem. And a lot of the mutual aid are looking for physical sponsor to help them with like actually transferring money to Gaza. And a lot of these physical sponsors, they exist in the global north. And like the US and like European countries, and they are shutting down any operation in relation to Palestine. So the question of like how, like one of the main asks probably would be like, if there are any physical sponsors who are working in Palestine, to think about like how can I extend my work also to include mutual aid, to invite mutual aid to the services that they provide of physical hosting and help them like reach the community. So that's another lens. The third lens is related to those who speak to people and like the political education that comes with donating for mutual aid is other aspects that is important to support the work of mutual aid. As I mentioned, like access to fund is a big issue. But then if we view donation as a political commitment, then the sustainability of the fund probably dynamic will change because you are committing, even if it's like $1 or $5 every month or every week, that's a political commitment that you do, and therefore like it influences those mutual aid access to finance that enables them to provide services in the ground.
That's a very interesting perspective because I think all this while we wanted to stay away from staying on the political POV, right? Because we thought like it's going to be destructive. But also this is an important view, so I think I hope that everyone will learn something from this. Before we wrap up, if you wanted to add something else.
No, so I just want to say that like right now the situation in Gaza is constituting what's known as a slow death, a brutal one. But it's like hidden from the media. It does not receive the same visibility.
Mainstream media.
Yeah, the visibility that it received like a year ago. Therefore, it's extremely important to constantly be aware of the situation in Gaza and like also to see the work that a lot of these mutual aid are doing on the ground and to think about like supporting them. Again, like support does not necessarily mean only donation. It could also mean like sharing of resources, sharing of expertise. A lot of this mutual aid, like we're looking at a certain point of time for volunteers to help them like translating their like media products into like certain languages. So the story is being told into different type of to different population. So like this is something that is important for us to think about, and also like it's very easy to feel hopeless in our context. But I think the people on the ground are forcing us to think that hope and hopelessness is a luxury that people cannot afford, and therefore you can't have the luxury of it's too complicated, I can't do anything, because everyone can. The question is like, do you have the will to do something or not?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's all for this session, and I hope everyone will get the message that basically it's about understanding everyone has a role in this. If you are in organization, NGO, or even individual, you have a role in this. And if you are a donor, or even if you can't donate, there are many things you can do for this part, and we can come together and complement each other, right? So thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.